We're going to be on in just another minute. Let's give it a couple of minutes for everybody to catch up with us here. We have a couple of questions already. We have a couple of people that sent me some questions that we'd like, or some topics they would like to actually discuss. So let's see what we got going on here today. 1 second. Okay, I see a couple other people coming aboard. All right, I think we're just about ready to go here. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to another Sunday night shop talk with Jim the Car Guy. Today we have a couple of things we're going to talk about. One, we're going to talk about some of this chat on the side over here. Jay, we had a question that we're going to get back to. We're going to come back to these in a little bit. So we're gonna come back. We're gonna watch it, but today we're gonna go through a couple of things first before we actually get to last week. I ran out of time and I wound up not answering a couple of questions that was sent to me last week. So I'm actually going to do it this week. So that way we'll do the older ones from last week first. We'll answer those questions first, and then I have a couple other things that we're going to talk about here as well. Like I got an email during the week and somebody wanted to know how I got started in the business and, how it was back then when I started. So we will talk about how I got started in the business and how I learned how to be a mechanic and how to run a business for so many years, 42, actually on my 43rd year right now. So, we will talk about that. But we do have a couple of things that were sent here to me by a couple of different companies. One of them I opened up already because it was a fairly large box and I was curious to see what was in it. So I did open that up already. And I will tell you this, as you can guess by the logo on the brim of the hat right here, it's actually a WD-40, which I knew WD-40 had a lot of different interests that they actually have, but I got a couple of different hats. One is the WD-40 hat, which I knew about, as I said. Lava Soap. I didn't know that they were actually connected with Lava Soap. Lava Soap, as you know, that's been around, I don't even know how long, but it's got to be as long as I can remember. I remember as a kid, using the Lava Soap. So that's been around a long time, and the 3-in-1. All right, so that's the 3 hats that was sent to me. These are the products that were sent to me. Lava Soap. Now this will probably make it down to work, but one of these bars of soap is going to stay here for when I'm working here in my home garage or doing some yard work outside, because sometimes at work you'll have all of your cleaners to get the grease off your hands, but at home you don't have anything to break through the grease and get it off. This stuff will work fabulous. And the old tried and true WD-40, everybody knows that logo, everybody sees it. This actually has the straw on it. This is actually not one of those cheap bendable straws. This one to me feels like it's very rigid. And I did use this the other day because I was actually doing a job here at home and I needed this. We have garage door lube. We're going to use this. We actually have a couple of cans of this. We actually got a couple of cans of it. So one of them is going to stay here at home, and the other one is going down to the shop, and we're going to lube up the garage doors so they open and close a little bit easier. I will use that here at home because my garage doors here at home do make a lot of noise while they're opening and closing. So we will get back to that. WD-40, this is a gel. I tried it out to see what it's like, and it actually sprays, not quite like a liquid, but it's actually fairly thick, so it stays where it actually goes to. A cleaner and degreaser. So this I'm probably going to bring down to work just because this will make a mess on my garage floor here at home, but at work we're going to use this too. So that, and these, it's like a 3-in-1 oil. We're going to use that as well. As you can see, I took one out already to keep home, and the other 2 are going to make it down to the shop. All right, so that's from WD-40. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It will come to a good use at the shop and here at home as well. All right, so WD-40, thanks for sending that stuff to me. And we have a couple of other things here today. Don't know what's in them. I didn't open them up yet, but we will get back to that. I see there's a lot of talking going on the side. I will get back to it, so don't think I'm being rude and not talking about it. I will go back and we'll talk about this. All right, this is something else that was sent to me. Nothing in the box, so I don't know who it came from. Gidma Motors. I'm not sure. Usually there's something in the box that'll tell me what it is. I got a feeling what this is right here. Seems to me like it's probably going to be lights. It doesn't say what it is, but I'm pretty confident that's what it's going to be. All right, let's open it up and see what it looks like. I will tell you this is really packed in there. Okay, this is similar to what I got last week. It's a set of lights. I'm not sure what number lights they would be. I'll have to look and see. It looks like it could be a like an H4, but we'll have to look and see. It doesn't say anything on the box. Huh. But you know what I noticed? It does say off-road use. So these are meant for off-road use, not for on the road. I don't know what company sent it to me. I'm assuming that this is the company. So we have that, and we have one more here. Don't know exactly what this one is, but we'll see. This was sent to me by like somebody from Singapore, actually. And this one is HD Sports earphones, up to 10 hours battery life. I'm assuming that these are probably going to be wireless headset. Oh, here we got in the back. Oh, yeah, it says right here, nickname wireless headset. 10 hours of playtime. Okay. All right, so we have this as well, a wireless headset. So, all right, so that's it for what we got today. Let's take a look and see what anybody has. A couple of questions here for me. We're going to come back in a minute to see. Okay, we have Jay Wee. Hi, Jim. Random discussion topic. What percentage of new cars do you think will still be powered by internal combustion engines in 20 years? Well, my opinion is I think combustion engines will be around for a long time, as much as everybody is, and anybody has their opinion. I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody about it. But as you can see, the electric cars started coming out, but when they have to be more cost efficient or effective or more efficient, actually, because when you have a car and it's got these battery packs on it, the life expectancy of these packs, I believe, is about 10 years. But the cost of replacing that battery pack is extremely expensive. So even though you are getting, decent mileage on the electric motor and everything, you have to factor in the cost of what it would cost you to actually replace the battery pack, down the road. They say it's a 10-year battery pack, from what I recall. But usually, like any other battery, like even in your cell phone, when you have a cell phone and your battery is supposed to last you, whatever, 3-4 years, whatever it is. As the battery gets older and it's in use more often, the battery life is less and less and less. It won't last as long as it would when it was brand new. Let's see what anybody has to say here. Okay. So anybody has anything to say about that, send me your opinion. But that's what I think. I don't think that that anything is going to be uh, electric for quite some time. As you know, that a lot of the cars they are actually experimenting. Especially, I think one of the car companies is experimenting with a hydrogen powered vehicle. Um, but to get a hydrogen charging stations or refilling stations any place is going to be quite some time down the road before that happens. Just my opinion. All right. So let's see what else we got here. Let me go back a little bit. I'm going to go back to the very beginning up here just to see what we got going on. Joe Mangy, I said I want to know what time is the stream. I'm going to try to do it every Sunday night at 7 o'clock, give or take a few minutes, depending on how everything goes and how quickly I can get back here. Usually, as everybody knows, I usually out walking my dogs. Tonight, made sure I was back with plenty of time to spare. Put the lava. Lon says, put the lava hat on. Maybe I will. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe next week we'll wear that one. Okay. Are you a big fan? This is Robert Lopez asks, Jim, are you a big fan of Mobil 1 10,000 mile oil changes? Absolutely not. As much as these oil companies tell you that the cars can go 10,000 miles, if you have a car for a short period of time and you're not going to keep the car for more than 3 or 4 years or whatever, then you can stretch out your oil changes. But if you want to get um, the most amount of time and the best use of your vehicle, I'm talking like 10 or 5 or 10 years, and you want to also have no problem with burning of oil or smoking or any kind of major engine problem. If you go 10,000 miles, I rest assured that by the time you get up to the 100,000 mile mark, you're going to start having problems, because the average person, changes their oil about every 3 to 5,000 miles now. 10,000 miles, I think, is stretching a little bit too far. So my opinion, again, I would not go that kind of mileage ever. My cars, I do 3,000 miles religiously. And if you're using a synthetic or a blend or a full synthetic, you can go a little bit longer. I would not go more than 5,000 on that oil change. All right. Let's go here. Darlene says, hello, this is Darlene with the 2010 Impala. Thanks for the info on the actuator. That was the problem. The battery didn't drain anymore. Oh yeah, I remember last week we talked about this, Darlene. I think that there was something where the actuator or the blend actuator inside in the glove compartment area was actually clicking, and it would not turn off. So what happens is when the car is actually put away or turned off or whatever it is, that motor is trying to retract and open it up. And if it can't retract as it moves, it'll actually pull down and pop up, pull down and pop up. And that's because everything inside is made of plastic and they start to wear out. So I'm happy that took care of it for you. That's absolutely great. Okay. Stanley says, I have a 1995 Buick. It will start, but in order to keep it running, I have to keep my foot on the gas, and it is backfiring. Do you know what could be wrong? Stanley, I hate to tell you, but it could be just so many different things can be wrong with it. What kind of a Buick do you have? Is it? It's probably going to be injected. I don't think it's going to be carbureted in 95. What size motor, like I said, what model car, how many miles on it. If you could send it to me, I'll try to answer it the best I can. I'll keep an eye out and see if I see you come up on the feed right here. Okay. Okay, Rick Hunter says, hey, Mr. Jim, could you please say if rear brakes can be replaced one? Oh, you know what? Rick, I got you on here. Hang on once. I just think it was buffering there for a second. Let's see. Oh yeah, Rick. You were my first question I was going to answer tonight. Okay, but I was gonna actually answer last week's questions first, but being that Rick sent me a question here, I'm going to answer his question first. And the question is, again, if you forgot, could you please say if the rear brakes can be replaced one at a time like the front brakes? Thanks. Yes, they can. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that when you're doing the rear brakes on a car, if depending on what kind of car it is, if you have the parking brakes inside the rotor itself, then you'll need to adjust the rotor inside the shoes inside the rotor itself. And in that case, then the wheels do have to be off the ground, both of them. But if you're just changing the rotor and you're just changing the brake pads, then you can do one at a time. Most people don't have a jack to jack up both, the whole back of the car at one time. So you can do just the one side at a time. Like I said, the only thing is that you'll have to adjust the parking brake, and that you will need to do with both wheels off the ground. Because when you're turning say you're doing the right rear wheel and the left wheel is on the ground, when you're trying to turn the right wheel, even if you put it in neutral, it'll still turn, but you'll still have a little bit of drag on it. So whenever I do those, I would definitely have both wheels off if you're going to adjust the parking brake. If there is no parking brake to adjust, then yes, you can absolutely do one at a time without any kind of a problem, just like you do with the fronts. I hope that helps. But I didn't forget about you. You were going to be my first one. Okay. We have Jeff Thomas. Hi, Jim. I saw your video on on a. Let me go back. I saw your video on carbon removal for a 2.0 direct injection VW engine. Do you catch cans? Well, to be honest with you, Jeff, I'm not really sure which video you're talking about. I don't recall doing a video on the Volkswagen. As everybody knows, I'm not a real big fan of Volkswagens, but I don't think I did one. I know I did a couple of things on Volkswagens, but it was not anything to do with the PVC system or anything like that. Okay, we got Nico79 that says, hi, Jim. Hello from the NYC, New York City. Thanks for the 14 Accord front brake video. Keep up the good work. Anytime I hope I helped you out. Okay, and now we have Stanley says, it's a 95 Buick Lesabre. Assuming it is injected, it's probably a 3.8 liter engine. Now, let me just go back and see what your symptom was again. Okay, you have to keep your foot on the gas and it's backfiring. On that particular car, I do remember, did you scan the car first off? You'll need to scan the car to find out if there's any codes inside the car. I have a feeling you're going to wind up with a code in there, and it may be something to do with the crankshaft sensor, if I'm not mistaken. That particular car did have a problem. When you're driving the car, you probably have very little power. It probably feels really sluggish when you're driving it. That particular car had a problem on the crankshaft sensor where the crankshaft pulley fits onto the shaft. They actually split internally. So you want to definitely scan the vehicle first and see what kind of code you have in there. And don't start changing any parts until you find out if there's any codes inside the system. That's very important. Let me know, and then we hopefully can help you out with that. Okay. All right. Now we're going to do a couple of other things here. I did talk to Rick already, so we can cross him out first on the list there. But we're going to go back to last week's questions first because I didn't finish those up. So we're going to do those first. The one from last week was Tim Rickett. It says, my battery was put in the car in February 2014. It was a good battery for years, but one night it fried on the highway. It's scary stuff. I had no lights or power. I did make it home, but barely. I thought it was the alternator because I never had one fry on the highway. We tested it by putting my friend's battery in. I bought a remanufactured battery from Interstate, and it runs great now. Tim, I don't think your battery was the problem. You definitely have something else going on with it. You want to actually check into that and see, because remember, when you have a car and you start the car up, your battery is used to start the car. Once the car is started and running, your battery is out of the picture. The alternator is just charging the battery, unless there's a problem in the charging system. If there's a problem in the charging system and the alternator is not charging properly, then you'll be pulling power from the battery. So I have a feeling you have more than just a bad battery there. I have a suspicion that you may have an intermittent problem going on inside the charging circuit somewhere, and it probably was not charging, because the car should never die. Once you get the car running and the battery is out of the picture, it doesn't pull power from the battery. The alternator is actually charging it. So I would check a little further into the charging system to make sure that you don't have a problem someplace else in the charging system. All right. Robert Wheeler says, good video. I've had this issue on my 2005 Altima. I believe I'm looking at a bad coupling. I wasn't sure exactly what this was about, but then after thinking about it, I remember doing a video on this particular car. It was a 2005 Nissan Altima, and if I could be mistaken, but the customer had gotten, the car was at another shop. The other shop told the owner of this car that he needed to change the rack and pinion, that the rack and pinion was no good. So he gave him, the price on the job, and the guy came to me and he told me what was going on. And I drove the car and it felt really kind of strange. It didn't feel like a rack and pinion. What would happen is you would be holding the steering wheel and you would turn the wheel. And as you turned the wheel, it would get real tight and then loosen up, real tight and loosen up. When I lifted the car up on the lift and I took a look at it, I had my guy turn the wheel. I could actually watch the coupling, the shaft that goes between the steering column and the car that you hold the wheel, which the shaft is down by your feet. What happened is that coupling right down there didn't fail by the feet, but it actually failed further down where it exits the firewall and connects into the top of the rack and pinion. The rack and pinion comes up like this. There's a coupling on here, and it goes into what's a universal joint right here. That universal joint and the first coupling right there failed. When I took it apart and checked it, you could take the joint, the coupling itself in one direction, it would turn nice and freely. The other direction, it wouldn't turn at all. It was super tight. So what would happen is the U-joint is supposed to swivel in all directions as it turns. And when you had one side that was rusted, it wouldn't turn all the way around. So that's why it would turn and bind, turn and bind. It was because of that. And the way you can check it, it's very easy to check. You don't want to go and change a rack and pinion if you're not absolutely sure about it. What you want to do is you want to take your tie rod ends, disconnect them from your rack and pinion. I'm sorry, disconnect them from your tie rod ends from the knuckle. Take those out, and now you'll have the wheels themselves are loose. You can pull both wheels out, away, and you'll have just the tie rod ends sticking through, and then you'll just go inside the vehicle and turn the wheel. If you could turn the wheel and you feel it binding up like that, then you know that coupling is no good. So on that particular car, it is a very common failure. I've run into this, I'm going to say, not a half dozen times, but at least 4 or 5 times for sure. So that is a very common thing. Let's get back over here and see what we're talking about over here now. Okay. Vic Reese says, hey, Jim, do you have any videos on testing electrical power windows? I have an 03 Civic and I'm not sure which part is causing the problem, but my passenger rear window won't work sometimes. Any help? I probably do have videos. I don't know if it's on a Civic. I do recall checking, I think it was a Buick. I did one on a Buick, but it's a basic common circuit. If you open up the back door and you look on the motor itself, the motor is going to have 2 leads on it, positive and negative. get yourself a good test light and just test the power on the switch itself. Unplug it from the motor, and you're going to have two leads on there. You take your test light and you take the one end of the test light and ground it to the vehicle someplace, and you take the other end of the test light and you put it into the plug that you would put into the motor, and you just test the switch. You test it up and you test it down. Now, what you're going to have on those is you're going to have actually negative and positive. And the way it works is that you'll have negative and positive. When you put the switch in the up position, you may have positive on this lead. When you put the window in the down position, you'll have positive on the other lead. It just reverses the polarity, and it actually raises and lowers the window. So if you have a test light that you're able to plug into both those connectors at the same time, you can plug it into both those connectors, negative and positive, put it up one direction, it should light. Put it in the down position, and it should light. So if you don't have positive in that location, then you'll need to go back and check the wiring coming from the main switch back to that door right there. So, all right, get yourself a good test light and just get inside that door, and you can actually test it. I get a feeling on something like that, you probably are going to have a bad motor, but you want to get in there with a test light, like I said, and check it just to make sure. All right. Okay, then we got John Abels is 2010. Okay, here we go. Let me just go back here. This is John 1240 Abel. Jim, how are the Buick Enclaves? Thinking about buying one. They're really not that bad. They're actually, cars years ago were not as dependable as they are today. The cars out there today, they're much more dependable than they used to be. This particular vehicle, I don't recall any kind of major issues with it, but you want to check Consumer Report. Consumer Report will actually tell you everything good and bad about that car, but they're really not that bad. So, John, I thought you had another car. You had another Buick, too, if I'm not mistaken. I seem to remember talking to you once before. Okay, let me see here. My favorite YouTube mechanic. Thanks for all the great videos. You could make a lot of videos repairing my car. All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to check it tomorrow. It's a first owner car. Look at the Carfax. Absolutely important. You want to make sure that that car was not tampered with at all. The Carfax is very important because if there's a possibility that the odometer was tampered with, or if it was in a major incident, you're going to wind up, Carfax will point that out to you. I will tell you this. I had one of my customers one time came into me a long time ago. It was such a long time ago. I think it was I don't even know what it was actually. I think it was an Omni or something like that. And the customer came in. It was brand new, within a year or something like that. It was, and everything back then had 3-year warranty. Customer brings it into me. I check the car out. Sure enough, the AC. There's a problem in the AC, but it's covered. So I just told it, take it back to the dealer and have the dealer take care of it under warranty for you. She brings the car back to me a couple of days later, and she said she took the car into the. Now I might add, she had just bought this car too. She brought the car into the dealer. The dealer took a look at it, ran the VIN number on it, gave the car back, and said that this car was actually, the warranty was void on it because this was actually, it was a total vehicle that somebody rebuilt. So she bought the car not even knowing that it was a rebuilt car. But the Carfax will tell you something like that. If you have a major accident or you had a major issue with the vehicle, it would actually, it would show up on the Carfax. All right. What do we got here? We have okay, the conference. The Carfax, it shows last month they did the front struts. Yeah, I mean, it just depends on how many miles you have on it, though, John, because it's kind of unusual to have struts going bad that quickly on a car. Usually it's, when it gets the mileage on there, you'll have something like that. But you definitely want to, if you have a decent mechanic that you deal with all the time, you may want to have them put it up on the lift and just take a look at it just to make sure that there wasn't damaged. I will tell you this one. This is another story I got for you. I had one of my customers comes in, and our car, she's looking for a new car. My customers, what I do is I tell them, if you're interested in the car, you go look at it, bring the car to me. I'll check the car for free for you, and I'll let you know if it's good or if it's no good. I had her come into the shop one time. She brings a car into me that she wants me to check for her. She's got the salesperson with her. I get the car in the shop. I drive it. It runs fairly decent. I take the car in the shop, and the guy who brings the car to me, the salesperson, we're talking, and I get the car, and he's telling me, yeah, these cars are never hit. They're actually clean cars. We buy them very low mileage, and then we sell them at a good price, so we do a lot of volume. The typical BS story. So while I'm talking to him, he's telling me the car was never hit. The car was clean. I get the car up on the lift. I put it up on the lift. As soon as I lift it up and I walk around the front of the car, I look up underneath the bottom of the radiator in the front by the grill. As I walk past it, I could see a V in the the condenser. What happened is at some point somebody hit into something and it actually bent the condenser in all the way into the radiator. I said to the guy, I called him over. I said, listen, I said, you told me this thing was never hit. I said, look at that. I said, this bumper had to be changed. The nose had to be done in this car. That radiator and the condenser are no good. And he gets me on the side and he says to me, he says, it'd be worth my while, if I would just tell the lady the car was good and let her buy the car. So needless to say, I threw him out of my shop and I called a woman in. I explained what was going on with her. She was very, very happy, takes the car, she leaves, she does not buy the car. She tells me she's looking for a car, and I had a very clean car come into my shop. I called her up and I said, listen, I got a car that came in, one of my lifelong customers. I said, I know this car is clean, never in an accident, garage kept its whole life, was Toyota. It was a Camry, if not mistaken. I said, this car is clean. It's immaculate. She comes down, looks at it, loves the car. She comes back. She says to me, I just want to talk to my son-in-law before I buy the car. I said, no problem. I called her up at the end of the day. I said, you interested before I make any other phone calls? I'm going to give you the first shot at it. She says, yeah, I talked to my son-in-law, and he says the car is too much money. It's priced too high. I said, well, it is priced at the top end of the pricing because it is in mint condition, never in an accident, immaculate condition, needed nothing, didn't even need to be washed. It was perfect. I said, you're not going to find a car that's clean. So she goes back later on. She says to me, I talked to my son-in-law, and he says, no, it's too much money. So now I looked at 2 other cars for the lady, and they were junk. So finally, I says to her, listen, I said, I can't look at any more cars for you. I said, if you want, have your son-in-law take a look at it because obviously he knows better about cars. So you probably want to have him look at it. Months goes by. She brings a car into me. She had bought a car, taken the son-in-law, bought the car. I lifted the car up on the lift to do an oil change. Not only was the car in an accident, but what happened is this is on the driver's side now. When I lifted it up on the driver's side, the body work that they did on it was so bad that when they put the skin on the door, because you can change just the skin on the outside of the door, you don't need to change the entire door. They put just the skin on the door. When they put the skin on the door, all the body work up top looked nice. But when you were down the bottom looking up at the car, they never closed off the seal, the bottom seam where the door actually skin went on there was actually open. I could take a piece of paper and stick it up through the bottom where the car was where the skin was put on the door. I go up underneath the car and I look up in the front. Not only was the car in an accident, the car must have been totaled because the car, in my opinion, I think the car was actually cut in half where they actually put the back half onto the front half because it must have been totaled out. The brake lines actually had compression unions on the brake lines. And you guys know compression unions are a no-no. You can never put compression unions on the car. So I don't know how I got started on that topic, but that's what happened there. Oh, that's right. We're talking about Carfax and having a good mechanic check it out for you. John, definitely, if you're going to buy it and you're serious about it, have a mechanic take a look at it, even if they lift it up on the lift and take a look at it. Okay, 2010, and it has 110,000 miles on it. You definitely want to have somebody take a look at it for you. 110,000 miles, there's lots of things that could have gone on underneath there. So before you spend a lot of money on that, definitely take it to whoever you deal with as a mechanic and get him to lift it up, pull the wheels, take a look at it, just to look the whole thing over to make sure if your mechanic is worth the salt, he'll be able to spot any kind of major issues with it. So even if you got to pay the guy an hour's labor to do it or whatever, it's absolutely well worth it. With 110,000 miles on it, you definitely want to make sure they throw the computer on it and make sure that somebody didn't just clear the codes out of it. I can't tell you how many times cars like this come into me over the warranty period, 100,000 miles, and it has emission problems. Where you'll get the car in, and this happens a lot. I get them in, I put my scan tool on it, and I check it out to find out that there's no codes in there. Well, I go back into the data stream to find out what's going on. And what happened is whoever just brought the car into you turned the check engine light off. So what I do is I go back into it and I check to make sure that everything is complete. The oxygen sensors, the evap system, especially the catalytic converters, because the catalytic converters, if they have an efficiency problem, that's the last thing to light up. So you definitely want to make sure that you have somebody scan it to make sure that you don't have a problem in any of the systems not being done. All right, so definitely spend the money, pay the guy an hour's labor to check the car out for you before you buy it. It's much better to pay the guy the hour's labor than to own the vehicle and then bring it into your mechanic, and the mechanic tells you you bought yourself a piece of junk. You should have me check it out first. All right. Just go back a little bit here. I'm sure it's John Clark just put an enclave on the lift for very long. Okay. Michael Thomas said I had an 05 Civic, and the wires going to the motor tend to come loose. Wires actually, they usually, not that I want to disagree with you, Michael, but wires just don't come loose. Usually when you see wires that are coming loose, it's because somebody was underneath there and they took the wires out of the holders that actually hold them in place. They usually fit in there pretty tightly, so the harness is actually held in there pretty tight, so it's not going to move. Pontiac 961 says, hasn't had the evap repair. As you know, that there is a lot of issues with evap and catalytic converters, so you want to make absolutely sure that that you have this thing scanned. Just before, it's better off, like I said, John, before you buy it, you want to make sure what's going on with it. All right, we're going to come back to this over here in just a minute, but I just want to go through a couple more questions here. This is Loretta Townsend writes, question, changed front disc / rotors on my 09, but now my wheel weights are rubbing the caliper. Any suggestions? If the noise wasn't there before and there is noise there now, chances are the parts that you got are the wrong parts. With cars today, it's an 09. I'm not sure exactly what kind of an 09 it is. But with every rotor, there's lots of different things you need to check when you have a rotor. Hopefully you still have the old parts. When you take a rotor and you put your new rotor on the floor, you take your old rotor and you set it up on top of it. You make sure that old rotor is exactly the same as the one below it. The diameter has got to be exactly the same. It cannot even be off 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch. It's got to be exactly the same. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten parts sent to my shop. Take the rotor, put it down on the ground, put the other one over the top of it, and you'll find out it's about 1/2 inch too big. There's lots of different variables. They may have just given you the wrong rotors. The other thing you want to do is you want to take your rotor, put it upside down on the ground, sit on a flat surface, take your other rotor and sit it on a flat surface, start your old one and your new one, and they should line up exactly across the top. There should not even be a 32nd or a 16th of an inch difference in height. You may have the old rotor that has a little bit of rust on it, but you want to make sure that they're absolutely the exact same height, because that's probably what happened, because they probably gave you the wrong parts. And I'm thinking that you probably changed just the rotors I'm hoping you didn't do anything with the calipers, because that can turn out to be a whole different issue with the caliper itself, because the caliper could also have a wrong mounting bracket and causing that problem. So you definitely want to check that out. Keep me posted and let me know what happens with that. And then we have another question from G Dude Show 2. Do we take the fluid out first before replacing the O-ring? And I think that what this one here is about, this is about a Honda. And Honda, as you know, they had a problem with the O-rings going bad on the power steering pump. When the O-rings go bad, it sucks air in through the O-ring, brings air into the pump, and this is the feed or pressure or return. What happens is that it pulls air in, and when it pulls air in, the air gets mixed in with the fluid, aerates the fluid, and creates like a whirring type noise when you turn it from side to side. So should you empty it out? If you can, yes. You'll be able to empty the reservoir, but you will probably not be able to get the fluid out of the pump. So you can empty the reservoir, or you can just pinch off the lines with a suitable tool, just to make sure the fluid doesn't run from the reservoir down. Just pinch off the line and you can pull it out. Make sure you have a lot of rags down there to catch any fluid, and you should be fine. The way I do it is I usually just have a lot of rags underneath there, because you really can't empty out that pump. All right, let's see what we got here going on now. Okay, Darlene says, sorry, but I do have a 2005 Volkswagen Beetle 2.0. I changed out the fuel filter on it, but I still get a little lug when I'm driving down the road. It could be a lot of different things. I know Volkswagens have very limited data that they give you, but most likely you do have something else going on with the vehicle other than just a fuel filter. You definitely want to scan it and see if anything else shows up, and hopefully it does show some kind of a code. If it doesn't, you may think about using some kind of injection cleaner in there to possibly clean out any kind of like carboned up injectors or anything like that. But scan it first before you do anything, and then go from there with it. Okay. Rick Hunter, thanks for the reply. I've been watching your silver CRV brake drum, brake fix vids. 99. Oh yeah, I remember that one. He was one of my real good customers too. And 99, he had a CRV. That thing had a lot of miles on it, and he took very good care of it. And wanted to know if both rear tires need to be in the air. No, that particular one you don't have to, because I don't think that the parking brake was inside the drum on that. I think that one there, if I'm not mistaken, it had the caliper that actually you had to turn the piston back in. So that one you can do it on the ground. It's fine to do it on the ground. All right. Make sure the readiness monitors are set. Exactly. Pontiac 961, you're right. Because if the monitors aren't ready, then you know that somebody actually disconnected the battery on there and or turned the light out. I've seen it happen not once, not twice, but dozens of times where people turn the light off. I had one car, a salesman brings the car in with the lady. They bring the car in, and the whole time we're driving the car, he's talking about all these other people who were selling cars, what scams they play, and this, that, and the other thing, and the games that these places play. And it's like, yeah, it happens all the time. I get the car back to the shop, and sure enough, this guy here, he did the same thing. He had just cleared the codes out of it, because I could tell there was like very low mileage on it since the last time it was cleared out. So you always want to make sure your monitors are ready. Very, very important, because otherwise you're going to be stuck with a very expensive bill. It will show on Carfax only if reported. You're right. John Clark 1 says it'll show on Carfax only if reported. You're right. That's why it's a good idea to have your mechanic lift it up and take a look at it. A lot of times what happens, as John's pointing out here, is that what happens if somebody has a minor fender bender, or somebody has an accident and they do not want to report it to the insurance company and they're going to pay out of pocket, it'll never show up on Carfax. So that's why it's important to have your mechanic lift it up and look at it, just to make sure. what condition everything is underneath the bottom of it. But you're right, John. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay. We have here 2019 Corolla, supposed to have a 2.0 liter engine. Any opinions on it? Truthfully, Hosen S. I mean, I've never seen that car yet. As with a lot of cars, when it comes to a private repair shop, what happens with us is that customers will buy a car, they'll be under warranty, and most of the time, for that first 3-year period of time, you don't see the customers. They go back to the dealer for their free oil changes or any kind of warranty issues. They're going back to the dealer. So most of the time, the cars that come into me are anything that's off a warranty already, and the mileage is over the 30 whatever thousand miles that they had given them. So I haven't had that into me yet. But it's a Toyota. How bad can it be? They're usually fairly decent cars. Okay, here we go. Peter says, I have worn both the rear shocks and rear springs. The car is very low because the springs are too soft. Can I replace just the springs and leave the shocks for later? 2 or 3 months. Just a couple of questions for you. What kind of car is it? A lot of newer cars, the springs are actually built onto the struts themselves. If you have a car that has shocks and springs separately, then yes, you can just change the springs and then go back later on and change the shocks. It is twice the work for you because you will have to take off the shock absorber, the lower part of the shock. You'll have to remove that to get the spring out and to get the new spring back in, of course. And when you're doing the shocks, you're going to wind up having to disconnect it at a later date. If it was me, I would say change the shock and the spring at the same time. You'll save yourself a little bit of additional work. So it's just me. I would definitely change both at the same time. But in a pinch, if you had to, you can just change one and then change the other later on, as long as they're two separate ones. As long as your spring and your shock are two different locations, which a lot of the bigger cars are like that. All right. And John is just telling me it's a 2010, 110,000 miles. John A. Clark, 1. It's hard to win something, Jim. Everyone is an expert, and we mechanics are the con artists. I agree with you. Most of the time, even when you're trying to be honest and tell somebody exactly what needs to be done, there's usually in their mind, there's always that doubt that you're trying to take advantage of them. So you're right about that. But what I find too is that most of your very, very loyal customers will believe whatever you tell them, and you don't steer them wrong. My customers, what I do with them is that I'll get the vehicle into the shop for an oil change or a flat tire or whatever it's in there for. And I'll usually tell them, this, and this is going on with your vehicle. You need to address them. And the priority in which you need to do them is you need to do your brakes first, your tires, or whatever it is. And I usually prioritize it for them, what needs to be done. And then usually at a later date, they'll come back and they'll get it done. Okay. Jerisnat, I hope I'm saying that right. That's kind of I'm not sure if I am. Love your stories. Well, I'm going to have another story for you because somebody did ask me how I got started, like I told you earlier, and we're going to talk about that, how I got started in the business and what I did when I worked for another guy when I first learned about the business. But we will come back to that. All right, I just want to touch on a couple of more things here. Okay, this one comes to me from Neil Williams. He writes, the rubber boot on my 2006 Impala is cut halfway across on the bottom side. When I go to replace it, how do I add grease and how much and what kind of grease should I use? If I think you're talking about a tie rod end. I've seen them on these cars before. When you look at the tie rod end, where the tie rod end comes out and goes into the knuckle itself, it comes through the knuckle. There's a rubber boot up on the top right there, and that's where you would actually grease it. The nut goes on the bottom right here. What happens is that you'll get a little bit of play in that joint there. When you have a little bit of play back and forth in that joint, it usually splits the boot. So most likely what you're going to wind up having to do is change the outer tie rod end. Once you change the outer tie rod end, the new tie rod ends come with grease fittings in them, and you can grease them. And just so you know, when you grease them at the shop, years ago we used to use a pressure gun to shoot the grease into it. The problem with the pressure guns are when you shoot the pressure gun into it, if you hold the trigger too long, you'll blow the boot and you'll destroy the boot. I like to use at the shop the hand pump because you can actually control how much goes into it. You can pump it in and you can feel the side of the boot itself. The boot, when you first put it on there, you're going to see the boot is collapsed down and it's very soft. You can feel there's nothing in it. As you pump the grease into it, you'll actually see the boot start to expand. And it should be to the point when you push it, it's like pushing on a balloon. When you push on it, you should have a little bit of push back and forth with it. It should not be bulging out to the point where it's going to actually pop, because it will pop and you'll wind up breaking that new boot. So you just want to put a little bit of grease into it just till it starts to push out, and then you'll be fine. And as far as what kind of grease, they sell them at any one of the parts stores, and it's meant for lubing the front end up. There's lots of different kinds out there. All right. Pandu Riza says, hi, this video was great. I have a Mitsubishi, an L200/Strata/Sporto/Warrior. We don't have those here in the States, so I'm assuming that you're not in the United States. I really don't know what a Warrior is or an L200. I was doing what you did, since my check engine light is blinking every time the engine is running, but I am not sure that it is the coil since I have no DTC in my scan tool. Do you have any idea what is actually? If you have a check engine light that's actually blinking while you're driving, that usually means you have a very serious situation going on where you have a misfire in that engine that's such a tremendous misfire that you can destroy your catalytic converter. I would definitely try to get a different scan tool, because if that check engine light is on and that check engine light is blinking, there's going to be a code inside there. It has to have a code in it because that computer is picking up something going wrong. So definitely look into another scan tool, because there's probably something going on with yours. There's so many different scan tools out there. You can usually pick up something decent for, $50 to $100. I usually have a bunch of scan tools here. I don't have any more left, but if you look back on my live stream, not last week, but the week before, there was a company that sent me a scan tool that I did a product review on, and I think I put a link in there. You can take a look at it on Amazon and see what it looks like. But you definitely want to scan it again just to make sure, because something is going on with it. And with that, the sooner you do it, the better, because the more you drive it, the more damage you're going to wind up doing. Okay, now we have something else here. Now we're going to talk about how I got started. All right, this is Robert Wheeler. I got the part. I'm already ready to change it. The bolt at the top and bottom is easy, but I moved the rug, and while it looks much the same, I don't see the bolt under the rug. I'm thinking that this one here that Robert's talking about I think that's going back to that job with the coupling. When you look underneath the vehicle, you can see it when you have the car up and you pull the wheel off the car. You can see the coupling on top of the rack and pinion. From what I remember, I think it's a 12 millimeter bolt in there. You take out that 12 millimeter bolt. The other one up underneath the bottom of the dashboard is in a tight spot. You actually have to get underneath there. You're laying on your back, looking up under the dashboard. It is very tight, but there is a coupling underneath there, and there you will also find a 12 millimeter bolt. A lot of times what happens is the bolt is up on the top there and you can't see it because there's a dust shield or a boot that actually is underneath there that keeps any kind of road debris from kicking up underneath there. But if you look on that dust shield there, that dust shield is screwed into the body of the car itself or truck, whatever it is, and you'll need to take the screws out, take that dust boot off. It's like a bellows inside there. Pull that dust boot off, and down underneath there is where you're going to find that coupling with that 12 millimeter bolt in it. On the steering shaft itself up high, you probably will have a bolt up there as well, but you will need to take that dust boot off so that you can see in there, because cars today just don't have a straight shaft that comes from the rack and pinion up to the steering column like that. A lot of times there's all different angles where it'll come off, up, turn. There's lots of different angles inside there, so you'll have sometimes 2 or 3 different universal joints in there. And by universal joints, I mean very small universal joints. They're not big U-joints like on the drive shaft. They're very small. So get that dust boot out of there, and you'll be able to see exactly where the that coupling is. But it's got to be underneath there, because it's got to be some way of attaching that coupling up to the steering rack and also to the steering shaft itself. All right, so I think that's the questions we had for today. But I did have somebody that sent me an email. You know what? Let's just go back over here. We're going to get back to this. I promise we'll talk about it a little bit more, because you want to hear some stories of when I started back in the day, a long time ago. Okay, we got 13,750 miles a year seems average on the 2010. Actually, it's probably low mileage. You're right, Lon. Most people today drive anywhere from 12 to 15,000 miles, and even though it is a 2010, you have to be that vehicle was probably bought in 2009. So that's the mileage is about right. Okay, then we got Joe writes, "What's your favorite brand of tires? I generally like Firestone and Bridgestone with a good thread. I know a lot of people that like the Michelin, but I haven't found anything with an aggressive thread." That's a good question. Personal preference. Me, I don't like Michelin tires. To me, a Michelin tire is very much overpriced, and I know I'm going to get a lot of people that they're going to disagree with this, but a Michelin tire, in my opinion, is just overpriced. You can get a Firestone, a Bridgestone, you can get a General, you can get any of the name brand tires out there for considerably less, and you get better mileage. If not, you'll get just as much, if not more miles than you will on a Michelin tire. Michelin, to me, is just a little bit overpriced. Okay, and then we have, enjoy your video. Finding a good mechanic is worth his weight in gold. That's true. I can't tell you what kind of so-called mechanics are out there today. I had a guy one time, right? And another story for you. My shop is on 2 corners, and up the street from me, which is the down street coming to my shop, up the street from me, there's another shop up there, and I won't mention who's in that shop, but it's not a very trustworthy place. But I had a guy come in. He pulls down the street, and he pulls into my door, and he says to me, "Can you take a look at my car? It's running a little bit rough. There's something wrong with it." I open up the hood, and it's clear cut, as clear as day. It's daylight now, and I could see sparks jumping from the spark plug wires underneath the hood. I could watch them jumping. So I took a spray thing of water, and I went underneath the hood, and I sprayed the wires with the water, which then made the sparking a lot worse. I said to the guy, I said, "You just need to tune this car up. You need plugs, you need wires, you need the cap and rotor. You need to change all this stuff." He said, "I just had that done." He says, "Couple of weeks ago, I just had it replaced." He said, "The guy up the street replaced all this stuff for me." So I went underneath the hood and took a good look at it. And I said to the guy, I said, "I don't want to get involved with it, but if I were you, I would go back up to this guy here and I'd have a little discussion with him, because this cap, rotor, and wires, they're not new. It's still the original one. It still had the date. And as you know, the Fords back in the day, the Fords had the date written on the wire, not the date as far as month, but it had the date as far as the year. Like if it's an 87, it would have said 1987 on the wire. So as I pointed out to the guy, I said, that's the date that this wire was manufactured, and that's the date that the wires were installed on this car. They never actually, replaced the wires on it, and so that's that story. So, okay. Got here. I have a 2015. This is a JR. It says, Jim, I have a 2015 Santa Fe. Need to change the rear brake pads, but not sure the minimum width I can go before changing the rotors. Thanks, JR from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Okay. To be truthful with you, Jim, nowadays it doesn't even have the minimum machine tool means nothing. On these cars, these trucks here, these rotors, they rust up like crazy. There's probably a significant amount of rust on it. Unless that rotor is perfectly smooth, if it was my car, I wouldn't take a chance. I would change the rotors. The price of rotors have come down so drastically over the years. You can get a rotor for next to nothing. It's not worth putting a set of brake pads on it only to find out that the car is going to be shaking or there's an issue with it. So you definitely want to, if it was my car, I would change the rotors at the same time. Okay, Pontiac 961. If you do the tie rod, strongly advise an alignment. Absolutely. I'm sure that there's a conversation back that I missed, but Pontiac 961, you're right. If you're changing any tie rod ends at all, you absolutely want to get that alignment checked. And what I always tell everybody is any kind of front end work at all, check the alignment. It's definitely a thing to do. Hello. Joshua writes, Jimmy, hello. Sorry for the misspell the last time around. Just wanted to drop by and give you a shout out. Thank you very much. And you know what, Joshua, don't feel bad about the misspell, because truthfully, if it wasn't for spell check on the computer, half of my emails that I send out would have errors in it as well. So don't feel bad about that. I'm terrible with spelling as well, but spell check, it does save my rear end quite a few times. Okay, let me just go here. Okay, John A. Clark 1, looking forward to back in the day stories. Okay, all right. Well, we're not going to go any further with this right now, but I will. McGee 63 knows the place I'm talking about. Actually, the guy went out of business and somebody else took the place over. He packed up during the night and he skipped town. So the guy in there now is not the same guy. Okay. This is stories from back in the day. Let me just see. Good to know. Look, this is John A. Clark says, looking forward to back in the day stories. Okay, I'm going to give you a back in the day story. Somebody had sent me an email and asked me how I got started in the business. The way I got started in the business was when I was very young. I got a job working in a factory, just a part-time job. And it was indoors. You walked in the morning and you didn't walk out until the end of the day, so you didn't see any light at all. It was you were in the warehouse and you never were outside. And I said to myself, I just can't do this. Well, my uncle was friends with a guy in a gas station, and my uncle says to me one day, he says, listen, he says, if you want a job, he says, I can get you a job up at this gas station pumping gas. So I said, you know what? I'm going to take it. I don't want to be in a warehouse. I want to do something, with on the weekends, and I want to, do something, and I wouldn't mind learning about cars. So I got a job working in this gas station pumping gas. It was to my benefit. The guy who owned the shop was a decent guy, and he started teaching me how to fix cars. So what I would do is after school, I'd get there. I'd start at 4 o'clock, and I'd work until 11 o'clock at night. And on Saturdays and Sundays, I'd be at the shop as well. And I would be pumping gas, and he would be showing me how to fix cars. And it got to the point where back then it was fairly easy to work on a car. So he would show me how to tear an engine apart. We would do valve jobs. We used to do like crazy back then. And he would leave me at the end of the day at 4 o'clock and tell me, that Chevy over there, pull the heads off of it. And, he had to send the machine shop to have the heads machined. And while I was pumping gas, I would be pulling the car apart at the same time. And for me, I loved it because I got to actually do something, tearing the car apart. So I would tear it apart. Now, in the beginning, he didn't let me put it back together. He would let me tear it apart, but he put it back together. So after I tore them apart for, time and time again, I could do those with my eyes closed. I knew exactly what I was doing. So that's how I started to learn how to fix cars. So on my day off, I would go up to the shop and then hang out at the shop, and he would show me exactly what to do and how to do it. And that's how I started learning, to fix cars. And back then it was like I used to be there 7 days a week. On my day off, I'd be up there, and we would actually. A lot of you guys don't know this, but back in the days like in the 70s or whatever, every repair shop, every garage, every gas station had their own race cars. The guy that I worked for had his own race car too. He had a Plymouth. It was a Fury, a 383. And one day he goes out and he buys a car. Back in the day, you didn't have the computer where you could look on a computer to try to see who has a car and you wanted to buy a car. Back then, you used to get a book, and it was called, I don't even know if they have it anymore. It's called a one-ad press. And you'd look through the one-ad press and you'd see the cars in there. Well, he finds this car in there. It was a Barracuda. And the Barracuda, it was a very small engine that was in the Barracuda. I think it was like a 318 or something like that. Or I don't recall exactly. It may have even been a smaller engine. I'm not sure. But he goes and he buys the car minus the engine, gets the car down to the shop, sends it out, has it all painted. He calls up a friend of his in a dealership, and he says, "Listen," he said, "if you have any scrap motors," he says, "let me know." He says, "I want to get a 383 or a 440." So he says, "Lee," he says, "I got a 440 laying here on the ground." He says, "Through a rod." He said, "If you want it," he says, "come on up and pick it up." So we hopped in a tow truck, went up to this guy's shop, and he gave us the 440 for free. He said, "It's just scrap." He said, "If you want it, you can have it." So we pulled it, threw it in the back of the tow truck, took it up to the shop. We tore it down. And as it turns out, they said it threw a rod, but it didn't throw a rod. What it actually did is it broke instead of breaking a connecting rod, it broke a push rod. One of the push rods had bent and actually went sideways, so it was causing the pop through there. And they assumed the whole engine was no good, but in reality, it wasn't. So we tore the whole engine down, sent it out to the machine shop, redid the engine. We went and back in the day, if you had a car that was a 318 or a 340 or whatever, and you wanted to put a 440 in that, all you had to do was go out and you bought the subframe. It's called the K-frame. What you would do is you would take the K-frame, you would unbolt 4 bolts in it, and you would take the K-frame out. When the K-frame basically was with the engine supports that held the engine in place. So you can go and buy the bigger K-frame, and then you could take that 440 and put it right inside there, which is what we did. We took the 440, rebuilt it, put it inside there, had the transmission redone, so it was a racing trans, and we had a Barracuda. It was a 440, and we used to take it down to a lot of you guys from New Jersey will remember this, Raceway Park, and I'm sure McGee 63 probably knows. I think you were from Jersey City. I'm sure you know where that is, but Raceway Park, we used to go down there every I think it was at night, and one night, I think it was like Wednesdays, you used to go down there and you could run your car at night, or you can go down there on Saturdays and Sundays and run your car. So we used to go down there all the time and run the car at the track. Sometimes we used to run it as a 446 pack, and other times we would run it as a 440 with 2 4s. You could actually unbolt the intake manifold, take the off, and inside of 20 minutes, you could put the intake on for 2 4s. So you could run the car on 2 4s, 2 4-barrel carburetors. So theoretically, you'd have each cylinder would have 1 barrel of the carburetor that would feed it fuel, and that thing was like a rocket. You'd step on the accelerator, it would pin you to the back of the car. The front of the car would come off the ground. We had to actually put into that car, we had to put into it 2 fuel pumps just to drive that car, because it burnt so much fuel that the pump couldn't feed the fuel to the engine quick enough. So we wound up putting an electric pump in, and that's how we used to feed it. And when we took it down to the track, we used to actually have underneath the hood, it was to cool the fuel, because cool fuel burnt better than hot fuel. When you're down at the track and it's 100 degrees down there, that car, back then used to have cars used to vapor lock all the time. And what happened is the fuel used to vaporize before it even got into the carburetor because the cars were so hot. So what we used to do is underneath the hood, there was a bucket about this big, and there was coils inside there. We used to buy dry ice and put dry ice in that bucket. So the fuel, when it was being pumped in, had to circulate through those coils, and it would cool the fuel down. So when it got into the engine, it would burn without vaporizing and vapor locking the engine. But that was back in the day. I will tell you this story. The guy I used to work for, one of his best friends, who was a construction guy, and he decided he wanted to get into racing as well. And he didn't want to do the stock cars or any kind of like alterations of car. He wanted to run a funny car. So he saw an ad that somebody was selling a funny car, and he bought it from a very famous person someplace down in Florida. He has the car shipped up here, gets it up to the shop, and it was a rail, but it was a front engine dragster. And now back in the day, they used to have only front engines. But when the engine used to let go or the transmission would let go, usually you lose some body part because it would actually just come apart like a hand grenade. So they went to rear engine cars where the engine was behind the driver. So my friend bought this one that was a front engine, and he tried to become a race car driver. Now he drove cars as a kid on the street, but down at the track it's a little bit different. When you pull up to the staging area and you're in a rail, that car, it's very impressive. When that thing is running, you have flames coming out of the stacks on that thing, and you're pulling up to the line, and your Christmas tree is going to blink down. It's going to blink down. It's quick. It blinks right down, and bam, you're off the line and you go. Well, we went down there, and this guy had the car all totally ready to go, and you would start the car up. It did not have a starter in the car. You had an external starter. You had to plug it into it, twist it, fire the car up, and then take the starter back out just for weight so that the car was lighter. This guy pulls up to the staging area, and it does his burnout to heat the tires up. He pulls up to the light. The tree blinks down. The other guy takes off. The guy I know stalls the car coming off the line, and we had to push the car off and get it out of there. So it's not as easy as it looks when you see these pros doing the racing. But there was this incident back then. Everybody was racing was a big thing, and you used to go to the industrial areas, and everybody would race in the industrial areas, whether it was at night, was it legal or not legal? I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming it was not legal. Well, these guys said to my friend, they said to him, "We have a car, and we will run anybody with any car for the title. If we win, we take your car. You win, you take my car." My friend says to him, "Any car?" He says, "You'll bring any car, and I'll race it for the bill of sale." They call it the pink slip. So my friend says, "Okay." He says, "It's a deal. We'll meet you down in Jersey City." Was a place down there, and McGee 63. I know you're going to know this one. It was Burma Road. Back in the day, Burma Road was an industrial area. And at night, you go down there, and it was like a ghost town. There was nothing down there. Well, we go down there, and my friend takes the trailer, pulls the trailer down, puts the trailer on the side. These other guys are on the side there with their car, and they had a really fast car. It was quick. And they're over there, and they're shooting their mouth off about, "Yeah, we're going to run you for the title. We're going to own that vehicle." Well, my friend opens up the trailer, and these guys are in front of the trailer, so they can't see what's coming out of the trailer. But he rolls it back out of the trailer. When he rolls it out of the trailer, we hit it with the starter and fired the thing up. And, the thing starts up, and it's shooting flames out of the stacks. And all of a sudden, everybody is scattering. The guys take off. My buddy is sitting in the race car, and I knew what was going on because I was standing there and I saw it. And a policeman came up and he tapped him on the head. My buddy looks up like this, and the cop does like this. He shuts the car off. The policeman says, "I'm going around the block." He says, "When I come back here," he says, "you, this truck, and everybody else here better not be here." So he caught a break, loaded that car up, and got the heck out of there. And we never saw those guys again. It was. I think they ran with their tail between their legs and knew that they were beat when they saw that car. So that's a little of the stories of back in the day. McGee 63 says he knows the place. Hi, Jim. Michelin tires came on my 2010 Ford Escape, and they are very noisy. I hate them. That's one of the problems you have is they do make a lot of noise. What I don't like about a Michelin tire is not only is it noisy, but when you have a tire and you're trying to break a tire down to whether replace it or patch it or change a valve stem or a TPMS sensor, when you try to break a tire, a Michelin tire loose, the sidewalls collapse like mad. That's why I don't like them. They're sometimes they're really rough. Where you have to spin the tire to break the bead. You'll have to spin it 4 or 5 times to get it to actually break loose. All right. Okay. John says, Jim, my mechanic said about a Buick, this stuff was done already. Spark plugs, brakes, trans fluid flushed, new tires, front struts, and a new manifold gasket. Sounds to me like there was quite a few things going on with that, John. I'd be very careful. Let me just go back over here. Oh boy, I got a bunch of stuff here we have to talk about yet. I think it's pretty late. Let's see. Yeah, it's pretty late. We're not going to get to a lot of this, but I will print some of this stuff off. We'll talk about some of this stuff next week at my next live stream, 7:00 next Sunday. But let me see here real quick. Yeah, traffic is always tough in Jersey. It's always bumper to bumper. Hi, Jim from Southern Cali. Bill Straub says a 273 Cuda. Yeah, back then we had a 440. That thing was a monster. We used to have slicks on that thing, and if you didn't heat those tires up, you would stomp on the gas and your tires would just spin. You couldn't even get traction. That's how quick that car was. Okay. Yeah, you're right. 273. You don't see them anymore, Line. You're right. Michelin. Just go back a little bit down here. See what else we have here. Toyota Ron says North Jersey is Mopar country. My buddy was from Rutherford, and I went with him years ago, and he found a 426 Hemi in Patterson. Wow, now that's an engine. I had an engine that I wasn't even sure what year it was. That somebody had actually told me, if you want this engine, come and get it. And as it turned out, it was a Mopar engine. It was what they called a wedge, and it was I forgot what it was exactly, but it was like it was a big engine. I put that thing up for sale, and the guy in Pennsylvania came down and bought it to put it in his Barracuda. You know what? Remind me next week. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to write myself a note so I don't forget. I'm going to tell you about the story about a guy I know who had a Roadrunner, and a very good friend of mine to this day. Let me see. It was back in the 70s. To this day, I'm still very good friends with him, and I'll tell you a story about his Barracuda. So I'm going to write myself a note, and we're going to talk about this next week. Yep, we're going to talk about this next week. Okay, we'll talk about that. All right, let's see what we got here. McGee 63. Yes, I know the area was a hotbed for illegal racing. Yep, that and McGee 63. You probably remember this too. Avenue P in Newark. Remember that? That was actually a very common place to go. And a lot of times, what happened is the police would overlook a lot of stuff. They would, if you were in the industrial area, they really didn't care that much. They would kind of give you a little bit of slack because as long as you're in the industrial area doing it and you're not out where there's actually residential, they really wouldn't give you too much of a hard time. We're going to talk about something else next week too. I'm going to write myself a note about this. This is actually something about back in the day as well. I just got to write this so I don't forget. If I do forget, remind me. It was about one time when I was going fishing with my dad, and we were heading up to Quincy Bay, Massachusetts, going fishing, and something had happened to us in the middle of the night. So remind me in case I forget. I wrote myself a note here, but we're going to talk about that next week, about fishing up in Quincy Bay and what happened on the ride up to Quincy Bay. I will tell you, I was driving my Gran Torino at the time. 73 Gran Torino, I might add. Okay, what do we got here? We're almost done. I think we're going to call it night. Oh, Pontiac 963. You're right. It was a 443 wedge, but it was actually it was an older. It was a 60 something. I think it was actually a set of 413/429. It was the wedge engine, and that's what they actually did on the castings. I think it said 413/429, if I'm not mistaken. Oh yeah, you know what, Chuck? You might have been right. It might have been 426. I don't remember exactly. You know what, Bill? Bill, you're right. It was the 413 or the 426, but the way it was actually written on the casting on the side of the engine itself, it did say 413/426. And actually, what I did is I actually took the numbers off of the casting to look it up to just to confirm it. I should have kept that motor, but I actually had no place to put it. It was laying in the middle of my shop, and as Mike will know, my shop is actually not the biggest shop in the world, so it took up a lot of room. So I did have to sell it before it wound up just getting smashed up. So, Mike, will see you here next week because I will be here next Sunday, 7 o'clock as well. And I think I'm going to call it a night right now because I think 420, it's 8:22, but I do have one more thing I want to ask anybody who, you remember last week we talked about this was one of the questions. Where was the world's first 3-color traffic light installed? And we know that was in Detroit, Michigan in 1919. 2 years later, they experimented with synchronized lighting, but I do have one more, and Glenn from OnStar actually got that right. And I did send Glenn what I promised I was going to. So I will ask this one of anybody and see if they can come up with it. Okay, here we go. What this whoever answers this, if you want any of this stuff that came to me today, except that WD-40 stuff, because I cannot send that stuff through the mail. As you know, it's flammable, and you can't send flammable liquids like that through the mail. But I do have these lights. I don't know what they actually fit, but if somebody wants those lights or they want the that I'll give that to them, and let's see what we got here. It says, what type of car had the distinction of being GM's 100 million car built in the U.S.? All right, so what car? And then we're going to call it night because I'm getting tired. It's a long night. What type of car had the distinction of being GM's 100 millionth car built in the U.S.? All right, so we'll give it a couple of minutes, see if anybody can come up with that. And don't Google it. I don't want to see anybody Googling anything on there. Oh, I'm surprised about that. I do remember working on this car too. Actually, the same color and everything. And they were a pain in the rear end. Okay, Mike says Camaro. Nope. Todd says Corvette. Nope. Neither one. Lon says Chevette. Good guess. But no, that's not it. And wait till I tell you, you're not going to believe what it was. And back in the day, these things used to be a pain in the rear end to work on, too. I'll give you one more hint. It had a lot of room underneath the hood to work. Lon says Impala. No, it's not an Impala either. McGee 63, good times. Ha ha ha. Mike says, Disgruntled Mechanic says a Corvair. Nope, not a Corvair either. Cavalier, nope. Yukon, nope. Impala, nope. Joe says Impala. No, that's not it. Darlene says GMC Jimmy. Good guess, but nope. I will tell you this. You got to get a little bit older with the cars. All right? A little bit older. The Malibu is not it. The Cavalier is not it. GM made that many cars. And even better than that, they actually sold that many cars. Chuck says a Caddy. Nice, good guess, but it's not a Caddy. Caprice, no, that Caprice, you're right. That Caprice has been around forever, but no, it wasn't a Caprice. It's actually a little bit older than the Caprice. All right, should I tell you what the answer is? I don't think you're going to guess it. A Monte Carlo, good guess, but not a Monte Carlo. All right, one more minute, and I'm going to tell you what the car is. Any other guesses? A Bonneville, a GTO, McGee. It's good guess, but it's not the GTO. Don't you wish you had a GTO? They're worth a lot of money today, right? Okay. All right, I'm going to tell you. You ready? It says the answer is on March 16th, 1966, saw an Olds Tornado roll off Lansing, Michigan with that honor. So it was actually an Olds Tornado, 1966. And I remember working on that car. I remember working on that exact color car. And the thing that was a pain in the rear end with them is they were I think it was the 66. That's when they came out with that front wheel drive, one of the first front wheel drive cars that were actually made. If you had that car today, can you imagine what that thing would be worth? Good guess, Joe, mid-century pickup, but nope. It was definitely the 1966 Oldsmobile Tornado. Okay. All right. I think we're going to call it night. I think we've been on long enough. It's probably about 8:30 now. All right. Anybody has any other subjects that they'd like me to talk about? Like in the very beginning, the McGee 63, it says, darn, the Tornado, front wheel drive too. Yeah, they were a pain. I remember when they first came out, it was a pain in the rear end to work on. You looked underneath the hood and you just shook your head because you knew what kind of trouble you're going to run into. And as it turned out to be a very dependable and decent car. And today it'd be worth a lot of money. All right, like I was saying, anybody who has any ideas of topics they want to talk about, if you want to hear more about the old days, when I used to work for other guys and all the race cars and all the racing stuff that we used to do. I mean, I used to go to Englishtown or Raceway Park. We used to go down there. We used to go by motorcycle down there, and then we would, spend the day down there racing. We used to trailer the vehicle down there, so I can tell you more about that stuff. We used to go to Englishtown. We used to go to Raceway Park. We used to go to Island Dragway, which anybody who knows New Jersey, Island Dragway is up around Route 80 area, heading towards Pennsylvania. That's where we used to go up there. You would be up there, and you could be 10 miles away, and you can hear the cars running up there because of just the echo through the mountains. The other place we used to go to was Pennsylvania. We went to, where the heck was that place in Pennsylvania? Hang on 1 second. See if I have anything written down. Oh, well, it was Yorktown, Pennsylvania. And in Yorktown, Pennsylvania, they didn't have a racetrack up there. You used to actually shut the airport down. We used to race on the tarmac where the planes would land. So that we used to do. We were supposed to go to Gainesville one year to go racing down there, but the driver broke his foot, and we couldn't go. But that was supposed to be down in Gainesville. We were supposed to do that. So any topics, anybody wants to talk about anything, I think you can actually send me something, whether it's going to be an email, or I did notice when I turned my computer on today, people actually did put up suggestions of what they wanted me to talk about. So you can send me suggestions. We can talk about whatever you want. You want to talk about the old days? You want to talk about the new stuff? Whatever you want to talk about, send me it. And we can talk, and we'll go from there with it. All right, thanks for stopping by and spending, as it turns out, an hour and a half. I thought it was going to be an hour, but it turned out to be an hour and a half. So thanks, everybody, for stopping by. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.